You are not going anywhere. My parents are coming for dinner in an hour. Hurry up, clean this mess, fry those steaks, make the salad, and get the table set for 6 people. My daughter-in-law, Vicky, slammed the heavy grocery bags onto the counter. Before I could even stand up, she snatched my phone off the table and marched toward the front door. I stood paralyzed. Before I tell what happened, drop your city in the comments and subscribe. Ready for an amazing story? Let's begin. My hand shook just a little as I lifted the coffee mug to my lips. It wasn't from age, and it wasn't from the caffeine. It was nerves. Good nerves. The kind you get when you know something big is about to happen. I looked at the microwave clock. 12:45 p.m. I had exactly 1 hour and 15 minutes. The house was quiet, a rare, beautiful silence that I hadn't felt in this home for 4 years. The blinds were drawn just right to keep the harsh Texas sun off my face, casting a soft, professional light across the dining room table. In front of me sat my laptop, open and humming. The screen displayed the waiting room for a Zoom meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. sharp. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a lifeline. It was a final interview for a remote administrative assistant position. The pay wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to rent a small, 1-bedroom condo in Florida near my sister. Enough to buy my own groceries. Enough to leave this house in Plano, where I had become less of a person and more of a piece of furniture. I smoothed the front of my blue blouse. I hadn't worn it since my husband, Frank, passed away, but on the computer screen, it looked crisp. It looked like me, the woman I used to be before I became just Dennis's mother, or worse, Vicky's help. I took a deep breath, practicing my opening line for the interviewer. Good afternoon, my name is Diane Moreno, and I have over 30 years of experience in office management. The front door exploded open. The sound shattered my focus instantly. The heavy oak door slammed against the wall, vibrating the floorboards under my feet. The silence I had carefully cultivated vanished, replaced by the chaotic clatter of high heels on hardwood and the rustle of heavy plastic bags. Vicky, my daughter-in-law, stormed into the hallway, her face flushed and her hair slightly windblown. She wasn't supposed to be here. She had told Dennis she was spending the day at the spa and then meeting friends. Dennis was at work. The house was supposed to be mine until 5 p.m. You're not going anywhere. Vicky shouted before she even fully entered the room. She didn't say hello. She never said hello anymore. She marched into the dining room, carrying 3 overflowing grocery bags. She dropped them onto the kitchen island with a heavy thud. A carton of eggs rattled dangerously. The smell of raw meat and butcher paper wafted through the open pass-through window. Vicky, I started, half rising from my chair. What are you doing? I thought you were. Plans changed. Disaster. Absolute disaster. She snapped, not looking at me. She was frantically pulling items out of the bags. A massive tray of ribeye steaks, a bag of potatoes, a plastic container of expensive salad greens. My parents are coming. They're driving down from Oklahoma. They just called. They'll be here in an hour. My stomach dropped. An hour? Vicky, I can't. They think I made a home-cooked meal, she interrupted, her voice rising in that shrill tone she used when she wanted to drown me out. I told my mother I've been practicing that steak recipe she loves. I told them I'm serving dinner at 2:30. I need to impress them. Diane, my dad is finally thinking about helping us with the down payment for the lake house, but only if he thinks I've got our domestic life in order. She turned to me then, her eyes cold and expectant. So, hurry up. Get everything ready. Clean up this mess on the table. Fry those steaks, make the salad, and get dessert ready for 6 people. Oh, and Dennis is coming home early too. No, I said. The word felt foreign in my mouth. Vicky, listen to me. I have an appointment at 2 p.m. It's vital. I cannot be in the kitchen. Vicky stopped. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since she barged in. Her eyes drifted down to my blue blouse, then to the laptop open on the table. She saw the Zoom window. She saw the notepad with my carefully written references. She didn't look impressed. She looked annoyed. An appointment? She walked over to the table. For what? A doctor? You look fine. A job interview, I said, sitting up straighter. I'm interviewing for a job. Vicky let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a cruel sound. A job? Diane, be serious. You're 67. Who is going to hire you? And why on earth do you need a job? You live here. We pay for your food. We put a roof over your head. I want my own money, Vicky. I want to contribute or maybe move out, I said, my voice trembling slightly. That was the wrong thing to say. Her face hardened. The mask of the stressed hostess fell away, revealing the control freak underneath. She reached out and, with one swift motion, slammed my laptop shut. The screen went black. My reflection stared back at me, shocked, old, and small. You don't need a job, she hissed. You have us. And right now, us needs you to stop playing pretend businesswoman and help this family survive. Do you know how much stress Dennis is under? If my parents don't help with the money, we are drowning. But you don't care about that, do you? You're just selfish. She grabbed the laptop from the table. Vicky, put that back. I stood up, panic rising in my throat. I'm moving this so you won't be distracted, she said, tucking it under her arm. Then, her eyes darted to my cell phone sitting next to my coffee cup. She snatched that too, before I could even reach for it. And this, you need to focus. If you burn those steaks because you're chatting with your sister, my father will never let me hear the end of it. Vicky, that is my property. Give it back. She ignored me, walking back toward the front door. I have to go pick up the wine and get changed. I look a mess. I'll be back with Dennis and my parents in exactly 1 hour. Have the table set. Use the good china. And for heaven's sake, change out of that blouse. You'll get grease on it. She opened the front door, but she didn't just walk out. She paused at the security panel on the wall. We had a smart home system installed last year. Dennis insisted it was for safety. Everything was controlled by an app on their phones. The thermostat, the lights, and the locks. I saw Vicky tap a sequence into the panel. A loud beep echoed through the hallway. What are you doing? I asked, stepping into the foyer. Making sure you stay focused, she said. She looked at me one last time, a smirk playing on her lips. I'm setting the child lock. You know how the alarm is. If any door or window opens from the inside without the code, the siren goes off and the police are dispatched automatically. You don't want the police showing up and ruining dinner, do you? Vicky, you can't lock me in here. It's for your safety, Diane. You're getting forgetful lately. I wouldn't want you wandering off. She stepped out. The heavy door clicked shut. I heard the mechanical whir of the deadbolt sliding into place. Then, the automated voice of the security system filled the house. System armed. Child safety mode active. Perimeter sealed. I ran to the door. I grabbed the handle and twisted. Locked. I looked at the panel. It was glowing red. I didn't know the code. They changed it every month, and they never told me the new one. I rushed to the window in the living room. It had a sensor on the frame. If I cracked it open more than an inch, the ear-piercing siren would scream. The police would come. Vicky's parents would arrive to find police cars in the driveway. It would be a humiliation. Vicky would spin it. She would tell everyone I had a dementia episode. She would tell the police I was confused. I was trapped. I stood in the middle of the living room, my heart hammering against my ribs. My laptop was gone. My phone was gone. The landline had been disconnected months ago because Vicky said nobody uses them anymore. I walked back into the kitchen. The only sound in the entire house was the low, steady hum of the refrigerator. On the counter, the pile of bloody steaks sat in a heap, slowly thawing, bleeding onto the granite. I looked at the microwave clock. 12:55 p.m. I had missed my prep time. In 65 minutes, my interview would start. In 60 minutes, Vicky would return with her parents, expecting a feast. She thought she had won. She thought she had stripped me of my options, locked me in a box, and forced me to serve her. She thought I was just a helpless old woman who would do as she was told to avoid a scene. I looked at the raw meat. I looked at the knife block. The tears I wanted to cry didn't come. Instead, my hands curled into fists. She wanted a dinner. She wanted a show for her parents. I stared at the locked door. The clock ticked. I stared at the pile of raw, ribeye steaks on my granite countertop. The blood was pooling inside the plastic wrap, dark and unappealing. Beside them, the bag of potatoes sat like a lump of coal. In any other life, this would just be dinner. But right now, looking at that meat felt like looking at the shackles of a prisoner. People look at women my age, and they see two things: weakness or confusion. They think because we move a little slower or because our skin is softer, that our minds have gone soft too. They think we don't notice when we are being used. They think we are just happy to be included, happy to have a roof over our heads, happy to be useful. I am not weak, and I am certainly not confused. I am just tired, bone-deep tired. I lean my hip against the counter, taking the weight off my knees. My eyes traveled around the kitchen. It wasn't just a room, it was a history book. My husband, Frank, and I bought this house 35 years ago. It was a fixer-upper then. We scraped popcorn ceilings until our shoulders burned. We sanded these floors on our hands and knees. Frank built these cabinets himself. He was so proud of the crown molding. I remember him standing right where I was standing now, covered in sawdust, drinking a beer, telling me that this house was our legacy. It was supposed to be our sanctuary. When Frank passed away 5 years ago, the silence in the house was deafening. I missed him every single hour of every single day. But it was my house. I had my garden. I had my book club. I had my quiet mornings with coffee and the crossword puzzle. Then came the phone call. It was 4 years ago. Dennis called me, sounding frantic. He and Vicky had been renting a high-end apartment downtown, living far beyond their means, and the rent had just skyrocketed. They wanted to buy a house, he said, but they needed to save for a down payment. Just 6 months, Mom. He had pleaded, we just need to stack some cash. We'll stay in the guest room. You won't even know we're there. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He was my son. Frank would have wanted us to help. Temporarily. That was the word they used. I remember the day they moved in. Vicky walked through the front door, looked at my beige sofa, and wrinkled her nose. She didn't say thank you. She asked if I had Wi-Fi in the backyard. The first month was fine. We ate dinner together. I cooked. They cleaned up. It felt like family. But then the slow erosion began. It didn't happen all at once. It was like water dripping on a stone, wearing me down so slowly I didn't realize I was disappearing until it was too late. It started with the laundry. Diane, since you're doing a load of towels, do you mind throwing in Dennis's gym clothes? Vicky asked one morning. I did it. It seemed rude not to. Then it was the grocery shopping. I'm swamped at work. She texted. Can you pick up almond milk and quinoa? Then it was the cooking. We're so tired when we get home, Mom. Dennis said, it would be great if dinner was ready by 6:30. Within a year, the guest dynamic had flipped. They weren't staying in my house. I was living in theirs. The worst day, The day I should have kicked them out was 2 years ago. Vicky came home and announced that the guest room was too small for her yoga mat and her energy. She said they needed the master bedroom, my bedroom, the room I had shared with Frank for 3 decades. It just makes sense, she had argued, while Dennis stared at his shoes. You're one person. You don't need the ensuite bathroom. The guest room is cozier for you. I fought them on that. I cried. I told Dennis this was his father's room. Mom, please, Dennis had said, looking exhausted. It's just a room. Vicky needs the space to decompress. Don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult. That became the theme of my life. To keep the peace, to keep my relationship with my son, I moved my clothes into the small guest room down the hall. I slept in a twin bed while Vicky slept in the bed Frank and I bought for our 25th anniversary. That was the moment I became the unpaid maid, the ghost in the hallway. They stopped saving money. I saw the Amazon packages arriving daily. Clothes, electronics, expensive skincare. They bought new cars. They went on vacations to Cabo and didn't invite me. Yet, they never had enough for a down payment. Why would they leave? They had a free house, free utilities, and a live-in servant. But I wasn't just sitting here knitting and accepting my fate. That's what they didn't know. I looked at the microwave clock again. 1:15 p.m. 45 minutes. I had spent the last 6 months secretly taking online courses. I learned how to use Zoom. I learned advanced Excel. I brushed up on my typing. I updated my resume at the library when I told them I was going to the pharmacy. This job interview today wasn't about boredom. It wasn't about playing businesswoman like Vicky said. It was about Florida. My sister, Jean, lives in a retirement community in Sarasota. She sent me pictures. A small condo with a lanai overlooking a pond. No stairs. No yard work. And most importantly, no Vicky. Jean told me there was a unit opening up next to hers in 2 months. The rent was reasonable, but my Social Security check wouldn't cover it all. I needed this job to make up the difference. This job was my ticket out. It was my escape plan. I hadn't told Dennis because I knew he would guilt me into staying. He would say they couldn't manage the house without me. He would say I was abandoning him. Or worse, Vicky would find a way to sabotage it. And she just had. She knew. Deep down, she had to know. She sensed I was pulling away, that I was building something for myself, and she crushed it. She locked me in. She took my technology. She reduced me back down to the help. I looked at the stakes again. If I cooked them, if I played the good little mother-in-law, I was accepting my sentence. I was agreeing to die in this house, serving a woman who despised me and a son who was too weak to protect me. But if I didn't cook them, what? I had no phone. I had no internet. I was sealed in. My eyes drifted to the refrigerator. On the side, buried under a magnet from a pizza place, was a small, yellow sticky note. It had a phone number on it. Jean's number. I had it memorized, but seeing her handwriting gave me a jolt of electricity. Vicky had taken my cell phone. She had shut my laptop. She had disconnected the main landline in the hallway. But she forgot something. Frank was an electrical engineer. He didn't trust wireless systems. When he built his workshop in the garage, which was now filled with Dennis's golf clubs and storage boxes, he had installed a hardwired emergency line, a dedicated copper line that didn't run through the main modem. Vicky never went into the garage. It was dusty and smelled like old man. I looked at the child lock light on the back door. It was solid red. If I opened the door to the garage, the alarm would scream. But the pass-through window above the sink, it was small. It looked out onto the back patio, which connected to the side door of the garage. The sensors were on the doors and the main windows. Frank hadn't put a sensor on the pass-through because it was too small for a burglar to crawl through. I am not a burglar, but I am a desperate woman who has lost 15 pounds from stress in the last year. I looked at the clock. 1:20 p.m. I had a choice. I could stand here, fry these steaks, and let Vicky win. I could let this opportunity slip away and spend the rest of my life folding her underwear. Or I could fight. I walked over to the pass-through window and unlatched it. It slid open silently. The warm Texas air hit my face. I wasn't going to cook dinner. I was going to get my life back. Sorry, Vicky, I whispered to the empty kitchen. I grabbed a kitchen chair and dragged it to the sink. I was climbing out. I squeezed my body through the narrow pass-through window, ignoring the sharp bite of the metal frame digging into my ribs. It was undignified. It was painful. At 67 years old, I shouldn't be crawling out of my own kitchen like a thief in the night, scraping my elbows just to make a phone call. But desperation makes you do things you never thought possible. My feet hit the concrete of the patio with a heavy thud. The heat of the Texas afternoon wrapped around me instantly, heavy and humid. I didn't stop to brush off the dust. I ran to the side door of the garage. My heart was pounding in my throat, a frantic rhythm of hope and fear. Please be unlocked. Please. I grabbed the handle. It turned. Thank God. Frank never locked this door. He said a man needed easy access to his tools. I stepped into the dim, dusty air of the garage. It smelled of motor oil, sawdust, and memories. I navigated around Dennis's discarded golf clubs and boxes of Christmas decorations Vicky refused to store in the house. I made my way to the back wall, to the workbench where Frank used to spend his weekends. There it was, the old red wall-mounted phone. It was covered in a thick layer of gray dust, looking like a relic from another lifetime. I snatched the receiver from the cradle and pressed it to my ear. I held my breath, waiting for that familiar, comforting hum of the dial tone. Silence. I pressed the hook down. 1, 2, 3 times. Come on, I whispered, my voice cracking. Please, just give me a tone. Nothing. Just dead, hollow silence. I followed the cord. It ran down the wall and into the newly installed junction box near the floor. The wire wasn't cut. It was plugged in, but the little green light on the modem box next to it was dark. Then I remembered. 3 months ago, Vicky had switched our internet provider. We're bundling everything, she had said, tapping away on her tablet. It's cheaper to go full digital. No need for old-fashioned copper lines anymore. Diane. Nobody uses them. She hadn't just disconnected the phones in the house. She had canceled the landline service entirely. She knew I relied on it when the Wi-Fi acted up. She knew it was my safety net, and she had cut it without a second thought. I dropped the receiver. It swung against the wall, banging hollowly against the pegboard. I was completely cut off. Defeated, I walked back to the patio and stared at the pass-through window. I had to climb back in. I had to crawl back into my prison. The physical exertion was exhausting, but the emotional weight was heavier. I dragged a patio chair over, climbed up, and shimmied back into the kitchen, landing awkwardly on the counter next to the thawing steaks. I slid to the floor, my legs shaking. I looked at the smart home panel by the back door. It was glowing with that menacing red lock icon. I walked over to it, my fingers trembling. I tried the code, Frank, and I used for our alarm years ago, 1-9-8-0, the year we were married. Invalid code, the automated voice chirped cheerfully. I tried Dennis's birthday. Invalid code. I tried the last 4 digits of my social security number. Invalid code. System will lock out after 1 more failed attempt. I slumped against the wall. It wasn't just about security. This was control. Absolute, total control. My eyes landed on the kitchen island. In the chaos of her exit, Vicky had left my laptop there. She hadn't taken it with her. She had just shut it and shoved it aside to make room for the groceries. Hope flared, hot and sudden. I rushed over and flipped the lid open. The screen woke up. The Zoom icon was bouncing in the dock. I clicked it. A window popped up. Enter administrator password to connect to network. I froze. I typed in the password I had set up, Bluebird67. Incorrect password. I typed it again, slower this time, BLUEBHRD67. Incorrect password. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Why would my password be wrong? I used this laptop yesterday. I used it this morning to check my email. Then it hit me. Last night, I had left the laptop on the coffee table while I went to take a shower. Vicky had been in the living room, tidying up. She must have gone into the settings. She must have changed the user access. She tech-savvy enough to know that if she changed the admin password, I couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi. I couldn't open new applications. I couldn't do anything but stare at a wallpaper image of a beach I would never visit. I looked at the time in the corner of the screen. 1:58 p.m. The notification for my meeting popped up in the corner. Upcoming. Interview with Staffing Solutions. Start time, 2 p.m. I sat down on the bar stool. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't call. I couldn't log in. I couldn't leave. 2 p.m. The notification blinked. Join now. I clicked join one last time. Desperate. Network error. Please contact your administrator. My administrator was currently driving to the liquor store to buy Chardonnay. I watched the minutes tick by. 2:01, 2:05, 2:10. I imagined the interviewer on the other side of the digital divide. A nice woman named Sarah. She was probably checking her watch. She was probably checking her email to see if I had sent a cancellation note. She was probably thinking, well, if she can't even show up for the Zoom call, she certainly can't handle the job. She would mark me as a no-show. That goes on your record in these staffing agencies. They wouldn't call me again. 2:15 p.m. The screen dimmed, then went black as the laptop went to sleep. It was over. The tears I had been holding back finally came, but they weren't the loud, sobbing tears of a child. They were the silent, leaking tears of a woman who realizes she has been erased. I thought about the last 4 years, the sacrifices, the money I handed over, the space I gave up, the pride I swallowed. I thought it was a trade. I thought I was trading my comfort for family. I thought we were a team, but we weren't a team. I was a resource, a battery to be drained until it was empty and then discarded. Vicky didn't do this because she was stressed. She didn't lock me in because she was worried about my safety. This wasn't an accident. She saw me preparing. She saw the new blouse. She heard me practicing my answers. She saw the light returning to my eyes, the spark of independence that I thought had died with Frank, and she snuffed it out. Intentionally. If I got a job, I wouldn't be here to cook dinner at 6 p.m. If I moved to Florida, who would scrub the baseboards? Who would wait for the cable guy? Who would be the punching bag for her bad days? She needed me to be helpless. She needed me to be the confused old woman so she could be the saint who takes care of her. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. The tears stopped. The sadness in my chest began to harden. It cooled, freezing over into something sharp and heavy. It wasn't despair anymore. It was clarity. I looked at the raw steaks on the counter. The blood had leaked out onto the white granite, leaving a red stain. Fry the steaks. She had ordered. Make the salad. She wanted a servant. She wanted a perfect evening to impress her parents, to get their money, to keep living her lie. She wanted me to be the invisible prop in her stage play. I stood up. My knees didn't shake this time. I walked over to the sink and washed my face with cold water. I dried my hands on the towel Vicky had thrown on the floor. I looked at the clock. 2:30 p.m. They would be here in 30 minutes. I walked back to the pile of meat. I picked up the butcher knife. The weight of it felt good in my hand. "Okay, Vicky," I said to the empty, silent house. My voice was steady. "You want a dinner? You want a show?" I wasn't going to cook her recipe. I wasn't going to follow her orders. I was going to serve her exactly what she deserved. The sound of the garage door opening was usually the highlight of my day. For years, hearing the heavy rumble of the motor meant Dennis was home. It meant my son, the boy I raised, the man who used to run into my arms with skin knees, was back safe. But today, as the clock struck 3:30 p.m., that sound didn't bring relief. It brought a knot of anxiety that tightened in my chest. I stood by the kitchen island, my hands gripping the cold granite. I hadn't moved much since 2:30. I had just stood there, staring at the black screen of my laptop, listening to the silence of the house, waiting. The door from the garage opened. The alarm didn't scream this time. Dennis had the master code. He walked in, loosening his tie, his suit jacket slung over one arm. He looked exhausted. His shoulders were slumped, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He worked hard. I never denied that. He was a project manager for a construction firm, and the stress was eating him alive. He looked up and saw me. He didn't smile. He just scanned the room. He looked at the clean counters. I had wiped up the blood from the steak packaging, the swept floor, and the quiet order of the kitchen. He let out a long, audible breath of relief. "Oh, thank God," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. Vicky texted me in a panic. She said the house was a disaster zone, and you were having a moment. "But this looks fine, Mom." "It looks great." He walked past me to the fridge, grabbing a bottle of water. He didn't hug me. He didn't ask how I was. He was just glad the problem, me, wasn't causing a scene. "Dennis," I said. My voice sounded thin, brittle. He twisted the cap off the water and took a long drink before looking at me. "What? Is the food started? Her parents are going to be here in like 45 minutes. You know how her dad is about punctuality." "She locked me in," I said. I didn't scream it. I just said it. Dennis paused, the bottle halfway to his mouth. "What?" "Vicky." She set the child lock on the security system. She took my phone. She took my laptop access. She locked me inside this house. Dennis. I couldn't leave. I couldn't open a window. I watched his face. I waited for the outrage. I waited for him to slam the water bottle down, to pull out his phone and call his wife, to scream at her for treating his mother like a prisoner. I waited for the son I raised to protect me. Instead, he winced. He looked annoyed, but not at her. At me. "Mom, come on," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "Don't be dramatic. She didn't lock you in like a dungeon. She probably just set the alarm and forgot you didn't have the new code. She was rushing. You know how she gets when her parents visit. It wasn't an accident." I insisted, my hands trembling. She told me she was doing it. She said it was for my safety because I'm forgetful. And because of that, I missed my interview. Dennis froze. Interview. The job interview. The one at 2 p.m. I told you about it last week, but you were on your phone. I missed it, Dennis. I couldn't log in. She locked the computer. I saw the flicker of recognition in his eyes. He did remember. He knew. But then, just as quickly, the wall came up. The wall he had built to survive his marriage. He set the water bottle down and leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "Okay, look, I'm sorry you missed your appointment. That sucks. But honestly, Mom, maybe it's for the best." I stared at him. For the best. Yeah, I mean, why are you stressing yourself out trying to work? He gestured around the kitchen, encompassing the stainless steel appliances, the granite, the expensive house. You have us. We take care of you, don't we? You don't pay rent. You don't pay for groceries. You don't pay utilities. You have a pretty good life here. Why do you need to go work as a secretary for some stranger? It's not about the money, Dennis. It's about dignity. I want to move out. I want to go to Florida, near Jean. He laughed, a short, dismissive scoff. Florida? Mom, be realistic. You can't live alone. You're getting older. Who's going to help you? Who's going to watch out for you? You need us. I need you. I stepped closer to him. Dennis, I cook your meals. I clean your underwear. I wait for the plumber. I water the lawn. You don't need me to be safe. You need me to be free labor. His face hardened. That's not fair. We are a family. Families help each other. Vicky is under a lot of pressure right now. Her dad is dangling this money over our heads. And if we get it, we can finally pay off the credit cards. We need this dinner to go perfectly. We need you to be on the team. The team, I whispered, is locking your teammate in the house part of the game plan. Stop saying that, he snapped. His voice echoed in the kitchen. She didn't mean it like that. She's just intense. She wants things perfect. Can't you just support her this one time? Can't you just suck it up for one evening? So I don't have to listen to her scream all night. There it was. The truth. He didn't care about the lock. He didn't care about my job. He didn't care about my feelings. He just wanted a quiet night. He wanted to avoid Vicky's wrath. And if that meant sacrificing me, he was willing to do it. He was throwing me to the wolves so they wouldn't eat him. He wasn't the boy with the skinned knees anymore. He was a stranger in a suit, terrified of his own wife. He walked over to the pantry door, where Vicky had hung her hostess apron, a frilly, ridiculous thing she bought for photos but never wore. He grabbed it. He walked back to me and held it out. Please, Mom, he said. His voice softened, using that tone he used when he wanted money in college. Just fry the steaks. Make the salad. Set the table. Do it for me? I'm begging you. I can't handle a fight tonight. Just get through dinner, and we can talk about the lock thing tomorrow. I looked at the apron. It was white with little embroidered lemons on it. It looked like a costume. I looked at my son. He was pleading with me to accept my chains. He was asking me to validate his wife's abuse because it was easier for him. Something inside me broke. It wasn't a loud crack. It was a quiet final severance. The tether that held me to this house, to this obligation, to this guilt, it just snapped. I realized then that I had no one. My husband was gone. My son was gone, replaced by this coward. I was completely alone. And strangely, that realization didn't make me sad. It made me powerful. If I had no one to protect, I had nothing to lose. I reached out and took the apron from his hand. Okay, I said softly. Dennis slumped with relief. He actually smiled. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. I knew I could count on you. I'm going to go change and wash up. They'll be here soon. He started to walk away, confident that the crisis was averted. He thought he had managed me. He thought a little charm and a little guilt were all it took to put me back in my box. Dennis, I called out. He stopped at the doorway and looked back. Yeah, I'll make sure dinner is unforgettable, I said. He gave me a thumbs up. That's the spirit. Make it delicious. He turned and walked up the stairs, whistling a low tune, oblivious. He didn't see the look in my eyes. He didn't see that I wasn't putting the apron on to cook. I was putting it on to perform. He didn't know that unforgettable didn't mean delicious. It meant permanent. I tied the apron strings around my waist. I walked over to the pile of raw meat. I wasn't going to fry these steaks. Not for them. I picked up the tray. I looked at the garbage disposal. No, that was too noisy. I looked at the trash compactor. Perfect. I opened the compactor drawer. I slid the expensive prime-cut ribeye steaks, all 6 of them, directly into the bin. I added the bag of potatoes. I added the expensive salad greens. I pressed the button. Crunch. Grind. Silence. The dinner was gone. Now, it was time to set the table. I looked at my son. He was pleading with me to accept my chains. He was asking me to validate his wife's abuse because it was easier for him. Something inside me broke. It wasn't a loud crack. It was a quiet final severance. The tether that held me to this house, to this obligation, to this guilt. It just snapped. I realized then that I had no one. My husband was gone. My son was gone, replaced by this coward. I was completely alone. And strangely, that realization didn't make me sad. It made me powerful. If I had no one to protect, I had nothing to lose. I reached out and took the apron from his hand. Okay, I said softly. Dennis slumped with relief. He actually smiled. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. I knew I could count on you. I'm going to go change and wash up. They'll be here soon. He started to walk away, confident that the crisis was averted. He thought he had managed me. He thought a little charm and a little guilt were all it took to put me back in my box. Dennis! I called out. He stopped at the doorway and looked back. Yeah, I'll make sure dinner is unforgettable, I said. He gave me a thumbs up. That's the spirit. Make it delicious. He turned and walked up the stairs, whistling a low tune, oblivious. He didn't see the look in my eyes. He didn't see that I wasn't putting the apron on to cook. I was putting it on to perform. He didn't know that unforgettable didn't mean delicious. It meant permanent. I tied the apron strings around my waist. I walked over to the pile of raw meat. I wasn't going to fry these steaks. Not for them. I picked up the tray. I looked at the garbage disposal. No, that was too noisy. I looked at the trash compactor. Perfect. I opened the compactor drawer. I slid the expensive prime-cut ribeye steaks, all 6 of them, directly into the bin. I added the bag of potatoes. I added the expensive salad greens. I pressed the button. Crunch. Grind. Silence. The dinner was gone. Now, it was time to set the table. The kitchen was quiet again. The hum of the refrigerator seemed louder now, but it didn't sound like a prison sentence anymore. It sounded like a countdown. Dennis was upstairs. I could hear the pipes rattling as he turned on the shower. He was washing away the construction dust, washing away the guilt of leaving his mother trapped in a kitchen, preparing to play the role of the happy, successful son. He thought I was down here dutifully seasoning meat, peeling potatoes, and crying silent tears into the sink like I usually did. He was wrong. I stood in the center of the kitchen. The trash compactor was silent, holding the secret of the $600 worth of ribeye steaks I had just crushed into a cube of waste. Make it unforgettable, he had said. I wiped my hands on the lemon print apron. My heart was beating slow and steady, a heavy drum in my chest. The panic was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was a cold, sharp clarity. I needed to sell the lie for just 30 more minutes. I walked over to the stove. If the house didn't smell like food, Dennis would come down too early. I grabbed a skillet and set it on the burner. I poured in a glug of olive oil. I found an onion and a head of garlic in the pantry. I didn't chop them nicely. I hacked them apart and threw them into the hot oil. Within seconds, the aroma of sautéing garlic and onions filled the air. It was the universal smell of dinner is coming. It was a lie, but it smelled like love. Satisfied that the scent would keep Dennis upstairs, I turned my attention to the island. Vicky had been in such a frenzy she had left a trail of destruction behind her. Her spin-class water bottle, a stack of mail, and her oversized designer purse were sprawling across the counter. I moved the purse to wipe down the granite, but it was heavy. It flopped open, spilling its contents. Lipstick, protein bars, sunglasses, and a wad of crumpled paper. I started to shove the paper back in, but the logo caught my eye. The Galleria. That was the high-end mall downtown. The one Vicky claimed she hadn't visited in 6 months because they were tightening their belts. I smoothed out the paper. It was a receipt. The date was yesterday at 4:15 p.m. Store, Lux Leather Goods. Item, 1X quilted lambskin tote, black. Total, $3,250. Asterisk payment method, joint checking $45.90. My breath hitched. I stared at the numbers. $3,250. Yesterday, Dennis had sat at this very table, head in his hands, telling me they couldn't afford to fix the leak in the guest bathroom ceiling. He had told me that asking for $50 for a new pair of walking shoes was pushing it. He had told me they were barely making the mortgage. We need this dinner to go well, so her dad will help us, Dennis had said. They weren't broke. They were thieves. They were stealing my labor, stealing my peace, and claiming poverty while wearing the price of a used car on their shoulder. I looked at the receipt, then at the trash compactor. This wasn't just a piece of paper. This was ammunition. I folded the receipt carefully, sharp corners and straight lines, and slid it into the pocket of the apron. I needed more. If this was going to be a trial, I needed evidence. I looked around the kitchen. Vicky had taken my phone. She had locked my laptop, but in her arrogance, she had made a mistake. She always did. She assumed I was too technologically illiterate to be a threat. Sitting on the charging dock, near the coffee maker, was the family tablet, the iPad that controlled the house. I walked over to it and tapped the screen. It prompted for a passcode. I didn't know it. My heart sank. Of course, she locked this too. But then I saw the notifications stack on the lock screen. Alert. Smart home, front door locked, manual override. Alert. Smart home, child safety mode activated by user. Vicky. Time, 12:48 p.m. I didn't need to unlock the iPad. The evidence was right there on the notification screen. I walked over to the desk in the corner of the kitchen. The command center, Vicky called it. There was a wireless printer there. I had learned how to use the AirPrint feature during my secret computer classes. I held the iPad up, pressed the side buttons, and took a screenshot. Snap. I tapped the share icon on the screen. Printer, living room HP. I held my breath. The printer whirred to life. A single sheet of paper slid out. I picked it up. It was perfect. A time-stamped log proving she had locked me in. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate command sent from her phone while she stood in the driveway. I folded that paper too. Next, I went to my pile of interview prep materials that Vicky had swept onto the floor. I found my confirmation email for the Zoom meeting. It was printed on crisp white paper. Subject, final interview, Diane Moreno. Time, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Note, please log in 5 minutes early. I smoothed out the footprint on the corner of the page where Vicky had stepped on it. I had the receipt. I had the log. I had the interview. And finally, I went to the junk drawer. I dug past the rubber bands and the twist ties until my fingers closed around cold metal. My spare set of house keys. The ones I had hidden 3 years ago when Vicky started making noises about collecting keys for security. I had everything I needed. I checked the stove. The onions were browning, bordering on burning. I turned the heat down low. The smell was potent. It would buy me time. I walked into the formal dining room. Vicky hated this room. She called it stuffy. She hated the dark wood table frank and I had bought for our first Christmas. She hated the crystal chandelier. But most of all, she hated the china cabinet. Old people plates, she called them. Tacky floral garbage. I opened the glass doors of the cabinet. The smell of cedar and old porcelain wafted out. I reached for the top shelf. I pulled down the spode china. The blue Italian pattern. Frank's mother had given it to us. It was intricate, beautiful, and commanded respect. Vicky had forbidden me from using it. We used the square white plates, Diane. They look modern. Not tonight. I set the table for 6. I laid out the placemats. I placed the blue and white plates. I polished the silver forks until they gleamed like knives. I stood back and looked at the table. It looked like a holiday dinner from 20 years ago. It looked like dignity. Then came the final touch. I walked around the table, placing the cloth napkins. But before I set them down, I made my deposits. At the head of the table, where Vicky's father, Mr. Henderson, always insisted on sitting, I lifted the empty plate. I placed the smart home log, the proof of his daughter's cruelty, right in the center. I covered it with the blue napkin. At the seat to his right, where Vicky's mother would sit, I placed the interview confirmation, the proof of the future her daughter had stolen from me. I covered it. At Dennis's seat, to my left, I placed the receipt, the $3,250 lie. I wanted him to see exactly what his piece had cost. I covered it, and at the foot of the table where Vicky would sit to host, I placed my house keys. I stood back. The table looked pristine, elegant, welcoming. To the untrained eye, it was a beautiful spread awaiting a family meal. But I knew better. I wasn't setting the table for dinner. I was setting the stage for a trial. I heard the water turn off upstairs. Dennis was out of the shower. I walked back into the kitchen, stirred the burnt onions, and waited. The clock read 3:55 p.m. They would be here in 5 minutes. Let them come. I was ready. The doorbell rang at exactly 4 p.m. It wasn't a friendly sound. It was sharp and demanding, echoing through the house like a judge's gavel banging on a desk. I stood in the kitchen, wiping my hands on the lemon print apron one last time. I took a deep breath. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Upstairs, I heard Dennis scrambling. Heavy footsteps rushed across the landing. He was running down the stairs, fixing his tie, desperate to get to the door, before Vicky's father had to wait more than 10 seconds. I stayed where I was. I checked the stove. The burner was on low, keeping the skillet of burnt onions warm. The smell was thick and savory, masking the fact that the oven was stone cold. It was the smell of a lie, and it was perfect. I heard the front door open. Robert, Eleanor, you made good time. Dennis's voice was too loud, pitched high with nervous energy. The traffic on 75 was a nightmare. A booming voice replied. That was Robert Henderson. He didn't say hello. He lodged a complaint. That was his way. He was a man who thought the world existed to inconvenience him. Well, you're here now, Dennis said. Come in, come in. Vicky is just finishing up in the kitchen. I hope she didn't overcook the meat. A woman's voice drifted in. Eleanor, last time we were here, the roast was dry. You know, Robert can't digest dry meat. I smoothed my hair. I stood up straight. I put on a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Then the garage door opened. Vicky, she burst into the kitchen from the side door, carrying 2 bottles of expensive red wine. She looked frantic. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her makeup was fresh, but her eyes were wild. She was sweating through her foundation. She saw me standing there. She saw the clean counters. She smelled the onions. Relief washed over her face, followed immediately by her usual arrogance. She didn't say sorry. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just assumed I had done exactly what she ordered. Thank God, she breathed, shoving the wine bottles at me. Open these. Let them breathe. My dad wants the Cabernet first. She quickly checked her reflection in the microwave door, pinched her cheeks to give them color, and then turned to the hallway entrance just as her parents walked in. The transformation was instant. Her shoulders dropped, her smile widened, and her voice turned into syrup. Mom, Dad, she squealed, rushing over to hug them. I'm so glad you made it. Eleanor Henderson pulled back from the hug and looked Vicky up and down. You look tired, Victoria. Are you using that night cream I sent you? Just busy, Mom. You know how it is. Vicky laughed, a brittle sound. She looped her arm through her father's. I've been cooking all afternoon. I really wanted this to be special for you. It smells edible, Robert grunted, sniffing the air. Onions. Part of the glaze. Vicky lied smoothly. She turned and gestured toward me, as if she had just noticed I was there. And, of course, Diana's here. She's been helping me with the prep work. You know how she likes to feel useful. She said it with such condescension, framing me as a toddler who had been given a distraction so the adults could work. I stepped forward. I held the wine opener in one hand and the bottle in the other. Hello, Robert. Hello, Eleanor, I said. My voice was calm. Steady. Eleanor looked at me, her eyes darting to my apron. Hello, Diane. I see you're still wearing that apron. I thought you were retired. I am, I said, smiling at Vicky. But when family calls, you answer. It was my pleasure to help Vicky today. I wanted everything to be perfectly transparent. Vicky's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She looked at me sharply, trying to decipher my tone. But I just turned and began opening the wine. Well, let's sit, Robert commanded. I'm starving. I didn't eat lunch. Of course, Dad, Vicky said. Let's go into the dining room. Diane, can you bring the food out? I'll bring it out when everyone is seated. I said, it needs to rest. Vicky rushed past me to whisper in my ear, her voice dropping to a hiss so her parents couldn't hear. Did you fry them? Why is the oven off? I don't feel any heat. I looked her dead in the eye. It's all taken care of, Vicky. Don't worry. It's done. She searched my face for a second. She wanted to check the pots. She wanted to look in the oven. But Robert was already walking toward the dining room, complaining about the humidity. She couldn't leave him. She had to trust that her doormat mother-in-law had done the job. It better be perfect, she whispered. Then she spun around and followed her parents. Right this way. Wait until you see the table. I waited a beat. I listened to their footsteps on the hardwood. I heard the gasp from Eleanor. Oh, Eleanor said, is that the blue Italian spode? I walked into the dining room. The table looked magnificent. The crystal sparkled under the chandelier. The blue and white china, which had been packed away in boxes for 4 years because Vicky called it tacky, looked regal. It demanded respect. Yes, Vicky was saying, recovering quickly, I thought we should bring out the heirlooms tonight for a special occasion. Well, finally, Robert said, pulling out a chair. I was getting tired of those square cafeteria plates you usually use. This looks like a proper table. Vicky forced a laugh. I'm glad you like it. Everyone moved to their seats. Robert went to the head of the table. Eleanor went to his right. Dennis, looking pale and sweating, went to the left. Vicky walked to the foot of the table, the hostess spot. But I was already there. I stood behind the chair at the foot of the table. The chair Vicky considered her throne. Vicky froze. Her eyes widened. Diane, she said, her voice tight. That's my seat. You sit on the side, next to Dennis. The room went quiet. Robert looked up, annoyed by the delay. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Actually, I said, my voice projecting clearly in the silent room. I cooked the meal, Vicky. In my house, the cook sits at the head or the foot. You can sit on the side. Vicky's face turned bright red. She opened her mouth to argue, to tell me to move, to remind me that it was her house now. But she couldn't, not in front of her father, not when she was trying to play the perfect, benevolent daughter-in-law. If she caused a scene now, she looked petty. Fine, she snapped, pulling out the side chair next to her mother. It doesn't matter. Let's just eat. She sat down, fuming. Dennis wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at his empty plate, terrifyingly aware that the script had changed, but having no idea how the movie would end. I pulled out the chair and sat down. For the first time in 4 years, I was sitting at the head of my own table. I looked down the length of it. I saw Robert, impatient. I saw Eleanor, critical. I saw Dennis, cowardly. And I saw Vicky, seething. They were all looking at me. They were waiting for me to get up and fetch the heavy platter of steaks. They were waiting to be served. Vicky cleared her throat. Well, Diane, the food. Yes, Robert grunted. Let's get on with it. I folded my hands on the table. I didn't move to get up. We will eat in a moment, I said. But first, I realized we haven't been honest with each other lately. Mom, what are you doing? Dennis whispered, his voice trembling. Honest. Vicky laughed nervously. Diane, don't be weird. Dad is hungry. Hunger is a powerful thing, I said, looking at Vicky. It makes people do desperate things, like lying, or stealing, or locking people in houses. The silence that fell over the room was instant and heavy. You could hear a pin drop. Vicky's smile vanished. What are you talking about? I prepared a special appetizer, I said, looking around the table. It's right in front of you. I gestured to the blue cloth napkins resting on their empty plates. Before I bring out the main course, I said, I'd like everyone to lift their napkins. Vicky stood up halfway. No, I don't know what games she's playing, but sit down, Victoria. Robert barked. He didn't like being told what to do, and he was curious. He looked at me, then at the napkin. Lift them, I said, and one by one they did. The sound of 4 cloth napkins being lifted simultaneously was a soft rustle, like the whispering of dry leaves. It was a quiet sound, but in the tense silence of that dining room, it felt like the rumble of an approaching storm. I sat perfectly still, my hands clasped on the table, watching their faces. I wasn't the nervous, fluttering woman they expected. I was the judge, and the evidence had just been entered. Robert was the first to react. He picked up the paper I had placed on his plate, the smart home log. He squinted at it, adjusting his glasses. He was a man of details, a man who built a business on reading the fine print. He wouldn't just glance at it. He would analyze it. What is this? He grumbled, pulling the paper closer to the chandelier light. System log. 12:48 p.m. Manual override. Child lock. At the same moment, Eleanor gasped. She was holding the email confirmation for my interview. Her hand flew to her mouth. Diane, a job interview today. But the reaction I was waiting for came from my left. Dennis was staring at the crumpled receipt. He wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. His face had gone completely white, draining of all color. He looked at the numbers, $3, 250.00. And then he looked at the date. Yesterday. Dennis, Vicky asked, her voice trembling. She hadn't looked at her own plate yet. She was too busy scanning the room, trying to figure out where the attack was coming from. What is that? Dennis slowly lifted his head. He looked at his wife. You bought a bag? Vicky froze. What? You told me we couldn't afford to fix the roof, Dennis said, his voice barely a whisper. You told me we didn't have money for the plumber. I canceled my gym membership. I'd been taking leftovers to work for 6 months. He held up the receipt, his hand shaking with rage. You spent $3,000 on a handbag yesterday. Vicky's eyes widened. She lunged for the paper. That's old. That's from years ago. She's digging through trash to frame me. It's dated yesterday, Victoria, I said calmly. My voice cut through her panic like a knife. Vicky spun on me. You shut up. You senile old bat. You're confused. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said. Dad. Vicky turned to Robert, desperate. Don't listen to her. She's having an episode. She's been forgetting things lately. She probably printed all this nonsense out to cause drama because she's jealous. Robert didn't look up from the log. He was tracing the lines with his thick finger. It says here the command came from user, Vicky's iPhone. And it says the command was lock all perimeters, child safety mode. And the timestamp is 12:48 p.m. He looked up then. His eyes were hard. Victoria, did you lock your mother-in-law inside this house? It was for her safety. Vicky stammered, backing away from the table. She wanders. She gets confused. I have never wandered a day in my life, I said. I stood up then. I didn't rush. I stood up slowly, commanding the room. Vicky locked me in this house today at 12:48 p.m., I said, addressing Robert and Eleanor directly. She did it because she found out I had a job interview at 2 p.m., an interview that would have given me the income one needed to move to Florida, to be independent. Eleanor looked at Vicky, horror dawning on her face. You made her miss it. She sabotaged it. I continued. She took my phone. She locked my laptop. She cut the landline. She trapped me here like an animal because she didn't want a mother-in-law. She wanted a servant. She wanted me here to cook this dinner so she could pretend to be the perfect wife and secure your money. That's a lie. Vicky screamed. She was losing control now. The mask was gone. I cooked this dinner. Me. I've been slaving away all day. You told them you cooked, I said, turning to face her. You lied. You told Dennis, we have no money while you were shopping at the Galleria. You lied. You told me we were family. You lied. Dennis, Vicky shrieked, grabbing his arm. Do something. She's humiliating us. She's ruining everything. Dennis pulled his arm away from her as if she burned him. He looked at the receipt in his hand, then at the log his father was holding. The pieces were falling into place. The years of me complaining about her disrespect, which he had ignored. The constant money problems that never made sense. The fact that he found me locked in a house and told me to get over it. He looked at me. Mom, you missed the interview? For real? Yes, Dennis, I said. I missed it. And when you came home and I told you, you didn't care. You handed me an apron and told me to fry the steaks. You told me to make it unforgettable. I pointed to the napkin on Vicky's plate. Lift it, Vicky. I won't, she spat. Lift it, Robert commanded. His voice was a growl. Vicky's hand trembled as she snatched the blue napkin off her plate. Underneath sat my key ring, the house key, the garage key, the mail key, the keys to the prison I had lived in for 4 years. What is this? Vicky whispered. My resignation, I said. The room was silent again, save for the heavy breathing of Robert Henderson. He looked at his daughter with a mixture of disappointment and disgust. You locked a 67-year-old woman in a house. Robert asked, his voice low and dangerous, to force her to cook. Is this how we raised you? Dad, she's exaggerating. I needed help. You needed a slave, Eleanor said softly. She looked at me, her eyes wet. Diane, I am so sorry. I had no idea. Where is the food? Robert asked suddenly. He looked at the large silver platter in the center of the table, covered by a heavy domed lid. You said you cooked, Diane. Is there at least dinner? Or is this all just theater? Vicky seized on this. Yes, the food. See, she cooked. The house smells like onions and steak. She's lying about everything else, but she cooked. She's still the maid. She looked at me with a triumphant sneer. Open it, Diane. Serve the food. Do your job. She thought she still had me. She thought that because the house smelled of food, I had capitulated in the end. She thought that even if I was angry, my conditioning to serve would override my pride. I smiled. It was a cold smile. You want the dinner I prepared? I asked. Serve the damn steaks. Vicky shouted. I reached out and grabbed the handle of the silver lid. The metal was cool to the touch. Everyone leaned in. Dennis, hoping for a distraction. Robert, hoping for a meal. Vicky, hoping for a victory. I lifted the lid. Steam did not rise. The savory scent of roasted meat did not waft out. The platter was empty. It was stark white, clean, and glistening under the chandelier light. Not a crumb. Not a drop of gravy. Just empty, cold porcelain. The silence that followed was absolute. Vicky stared at the empty platter. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the kitchen, then back at the platter. But the smell, the onions. I burned 3 onions in a skillet to cover the smell of your failure. I said. I placed the lid gently back onto the table with a soft clink. Where are the steaks? Dennis asked, his voice hollow. The ribeyes? They were $60 a pound. They are in the trash compactor, I said, along with the potatoes. And the salad. I untied the lemon print apron. I pulled the loop over my head. I didn't throw it. I folded it neatly and placed it on the table next to the empty platter. I didn't fry the steaks, Vicky, I said, looking her dead in the eyes as her world crumbled around her. I packed my bags. I turned to the hallway where my suitcase was waiting by the door. Enjoy your evening, I said. I believe there's a pizza place down the street. The dining room didn't just explode. It imploded. I walked out of the room, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor, with a rhythm that felt like freedom. Behind me, the dam finally broke. $3,000. Robert Henderson's voice was a roar, shaking the walls. You locked an old woman in a house and spent my money on a purse. Dad, please, listen to me. Vicky sounded small. Her shrill, commanding tone was gone, replaced by the desperate squeak of a child caught stealing from the cookie jar. She's lying. She's manipulating you. The receipt isn't lying, Victoria. Dennis shouted. It was the first time in 4 years I had heard him raise his voice at her. You told me we were broke. You made me cancel my gym membership. You made me beg my mother for help. I did it for us. Vicky screamed back. To look good for them. To get the lake house money. There is no lake house money. Robert bellowed. Do you think I'm going to finance this circus? You treat your family like cattle. You're cut off, Victoria. Not a dime. And I want to see that bag returned by tomorrow morning, or I'm calling the police for theft of funds. I reached the hallway. My suitcase was standing by the front door, exactly where I had left it. It wasn't big, just to carry on with my essentials. 3 outfits, my medication, my important documents, and the framed photo of Frank from my nightstand. I didn't need the rest. The furniture, the garden, the memories in the walls, they were tainted now. They belonged to a life that had ended the moment Vicky locked that door. I extended the handle of the suitcase. The wheels hummed as I pulled it toward the foyer. Mom, wait. Dennis burst into the hallway. He was flushed, his tie crooked, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked like a man waking up from a long coma, blinking at the bright light of reality. He ran in front of the door, blocking my exit. "Mom, stop. Please. You can't just leave." He was breathless. We can fix this." "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she locked you in. I thought I don't know." "You knew enough, Dennis," I said. My voice was calm. I didn't feel the need to shout anymore. "You knew I missed my interview. You knew I was upset. And you told me to put on an apron." "I was stressed," he pleaded, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away. "I just wanted peace, Mom. You know how she gets." I was trying to keep the boat from rocking. "You were using me as the anchor," I said. "You let me drown, so you wouldn't have to get wet." "I'll talk to her," he promised, his eyes wide and desperate. "I'll make her apologize. I'll make her give you the keys back. We'll change the codes. You can have the master bedroom back. Just don't go. We need you." I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. It wasn't fear of losing his mother. It was fear of losing his buffer. He was terrified of being left alone in this house with Vicky and her parents. He wanted me to stay and absorb the blows, so he didn't have to. "You don't need me, Dennis," I said. "You need a maid. And you need a spine." He recoiled as if I had slapped him. "I'm going to my sister's," I told him. "Jean is expecting me. I reconnected the landline in the garage while you were in the shower. I called her. I also called the staffing agency." Dennis blinked. You called them?" "Yes. I told them there was a power outage caused by a storm. They believed me. My interview is rescheduled for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I'm taking it from Jean's kitchen table." "But Florida," Dennis stammered. "You can't just move to Florida. Who will take care of the house? Who will help me?" I gripped the handle of my suitcase tighter. This was the moment every mother dreads, but every parent eventually faces. The moment you have to stop saving your child so they can learn to save themselves. "You are 40 years old, Dennis," I said softly. "You have a job. You have a wife. You have a house. Figure it out." "Mom." Tears welled up in his eyes. "Please. I'm sorry." "I know you are," I said. "And I love you. But I love myself too. And I've forgotten that for a long time." I reached past him and unlocked the front door. The heavy oak swung open. The evening air rushed in. It was cool and crisp, smelling of rain and jasmine. It smelled like oxygen. "Do not call me," I said, turning back one last time. "Not until you have fixed this mess. Not until you are the man your father raised. Frank would be ashamed of what happened here today. Dennis, don't make him ashamed of you forever." I stepped out onto the porch. "Mom," he cried out, but he didn't follow me. He stayed in the safety of the foyer, trapped in the house he thought he owned. I walked down the driveway. An Uber was waiting at the curb, its headlights cutting through the dusk. I had ordered it using the call a ride feature on the landline service, one of the few useful things I learned in that digital world Vicky thought I was too stupid to navigate. The driver, a nice young man, popped the trunk. He took my suitcase. "Heading to the airport, ma'am?" he asked. "Bus station," I said. "And then Florida." I got into the back seat. The leather was cool. The car smelled like lemon air freshener, not the fake chemical smell of Vicky's cleaning supplies, but something fresh, something new. As the car pulled away, I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look at the window where I knew Dennis was watching. I didn't look at the dining room where Vicky was likely being written out of her father's will. I looked forward. I saw the streetlights flickering on, guiding my way. I felt the vibration of the road beneath the tires. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs completely for the first time in 4 years. I had no job yet. I had very little money. I was 67 years old and starting over with one suitcase. But as I watched the suburban prison fade into the rearview mirror, I smiled. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a servant. I wasn't invisible. I was Diane Moreno. And for the first time in a long time, I was free. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.